And it's a very good morning to the Gelding. We're just running a fraction late. A little bit of discussion on the pre-show discussion. But how's the weather at Caulfield as I speak to you now?
Good morning, Professor. Good morning, listeners. Um, Looking out the window, Professor, look, it's a little overcast, a little grey, but I'm not sure whether we'll get some rain, but certainly no wind around at the moment, Professor, or that's of any worry at the moment. But this afternoon, a bit of rain and a bit of, well, extreme wind, up to 60 50 miles per hour, 60 Ks is predicted, Professor. So it could be, and they're northerly winds, Professor, which will have a big effect, especially on horses as they run up the side there along the railway line, Professor.
All right, Gelding. Well, as I said, races at Caulfield. It's a 10-race card. The first is at 12:05. The last is at 5:20. Group racing returns, Gelding, with the
Group 1
Memsie
racing in Melbourne, Professor.
Race 9, the Memsie Stakes, over 1,400 metres, a 3-year-old plus Group 1 race, Gelding, and nice to have group racing back. There's a couple of Group 3s too.
Yeah, so good day's racing at Caulfield today, Professor. But we'll have to get our skates on. As you said, the first is at 12:05. And I thought I would have had plenty of time to put the bets on, Professor. But you surprised me with an early pick.
Yes, Gelding.
My tips, Professor, are late in the day. I'm going race 9 and race 10. Look, we've got the return of some fantastic horses today, Professor. Race 9, the Group 1 Memsie Stakes. We've got Pride of Jenny returning, Antino coming down from Queensland, and Mr. Brightside returning. There was no bigger favourite last season than myself on Mr. Brightside, Professor. And what a wonderful job the Hayes boys are going. But in this race, I've changed my mind, Professor. I think Pride of Jenny may be, though I had finished off its season last year, and I just think with the Kieran Ma magic that, he's flying at the moment, Kieran Ma, it just might be coming up to its best racing season and could be the best horse in Australia, Professor. Big statements, I know. I certainly like Via Sistine for that title as well, but I think we might see Pride of Jenny do something special this spring, Professor. So my first bet today is race 9, number 7, Pride of Jenny, trained by Kieran Ma, ridden by Declan Bates. Look, worry, Professor. Pride of Jenny has never won first up. And 1,400's a bit short of its pet distance, but it's so well performed at 1,600, Professor. Kieran Ma's given the horse 3 trials. I just think and it's a better horse than it was 2 or 3 years ago when it was having these first up starts. I think it can just get there. If the Hayes boys want to have Gentleman Roy take it on, well, I think we've seen what Pride of Jenny's done to some horses, and the same might happen to that. Still have a lot of respect for Mr. Brightside, Professor. Track specialist, first up specialist, loves the distance, but at round about the 260 mark compared to the 280. Pride of Jenny's, beaten Mr. Brightside a few times now. I'm happy with Pride of Jenny, Professor. The second bet is in race 10, number 2, Another Will. Again, another Kieran Ma trained horse to be ridden by Jamie Carr. Professor, this horse has had 8 starts for 5 wins, a second and a third. Its only flop was its last start when it started favourite in a Doncaster Mile, Professor, after 8 starts. Finished 7th, only beaten 2.4 lengths, to be ridden by Jamie Carr, who's in fine form at the moment. So, look, I've gone for what I consider 2 Group 1 horses today, Professor, in Pride of Jenny and another Will. So my bets are race 9, number 7, into a race 10, number 2. Both of them round about the 250. I think if we wait till later in the day, Professor, we might get closer to $3 on both of them. And I'll certainly be having a nice little all-up bet on them. And you like, Professor?
Yeah, Gelding, I'm going very early. One question I didn't ask you just before you gave your tips, Gelding, the rail in the true position, which we like to see, will that have any bearing on your selections or how the races will be run?
Well, Professor, Caulfield races, normally we would think that, true position back from 9 metres out when they come in. Caulfield normally faces on pace runners. So, we could, normally look at those. Pride of Jenny and Another Will are both on pace runners. Worrying factor today to me may be the wind.
The wind.
Yeah, and if it's strong, because that'll be a headwind into the leader's face, and it may dry out the track, Professor. I worry about Caulfield when they hand water it, Professor, and that's what they've been doing because of this drying wind that's been around Melbourne. So, all of a sudden you get lanes at Caulfield. So, again, it's a normal thing. Watch the pattern of racing, see the first couple of races. If they're winning on the rail, stick to it. Very much in favour of my 2 bets. But otherwise, we'll just see how the racing pattern goes, Professor. And your bet in the first may tell us.
It may well do, Gelding. I've gone for horse number 3, Sassy Boom. It's in the Sportsbet race replays handicap, a benchmark 84 for 4-year-old and above mares over 1,400 metres. Sassy Boom's coming out of barrier 7. Gelding had 11 starts for 3 wins and 2 placings, so a 27% win rate, a 45% place rate. What I like about the horse, Gelding, it's won over the distance. It's also won at the track. In February, it won the Group 2 Memsie Stakes. It didn't perform as well in the CUNY 2 weeks later, Gelding, but I think I had a look at the racing that was happening around that time, Gelding.
Yep.
The horse started in 3 races over a period of 3 weeks, including 2 Group 2s. I think by the time it got to the CUNY, it was cooked.
Yeah, Professor, sometimes that happens. Danny O'Brien is normally spot on. So anyway, let's wait and see.
I think they might have tried to squeeze too much juice out of the lemon, Gelding.
Oh, well, you can understand that from an owner's point of view, Professor.
I can, Gelding, I can. Although we did talk to our trainer, made a very good point about how he could enter a horse in a race that he was considering and thought, no, I'm probably trying to be a bit greedy at the moment. I'll just give the horse a spell and we'll come back bigger and better.
On that, Professor, is he setting us up to spell the horse again before it even resumes?
Oh, Gelding.
Hey?
Please.
Just for the listeners, can I tell the listeners, Professor?
Yes, you can, Gelding.
Peter, Mark and I have a share in a horse called Savvy Rocker, and we got the report from Peter Moody that it's returned to the stable. And I loved his quote, calling it a coat hanger.
Yeah.
So,
still got some growing to do.
Yeah, it has a bit more
filling out
to do, and we'll come back better as a mare. And here we've got a 3-year-old filly. We're looking forward to some runs, and the trainer's already putting maybe spelling it for a bit of growth. So I don't know, Professor.
Oh, anyway.
I wish he'd show the same patience with his bills as he does expect us to have patience with the horse, Professor.
Yeah, there's no patience there, Gelding.
No.
Anyway, what I like about Sassy Boom, the sectionals are very impressive, Gelding. I had a look at those. The horse runs very fast when it's going well. The threat is Lover Zoo, a Zoo Star mare.
Everyone's got to have a Zoo Star.
Everybody's got to have a Zoo Star. Blake Shin's in the saddle, Gelding. He's in very good form at the moment, and he's getting some very good rides too.
Oh, no one's riding better in Victoria than Blake Shin, Professor.
So I'm very happy with him. And as you said, Danny O'Brien, the trainer. My other horse that I like is in race 5, Gelding, the Parlay Black Caviar, a Group 3 for 4-year-old and above horses over 1,100 metres. I like in this race, Gelding, horse number 2, Recommendation, and it's my recommendation for today, coming out of barrier 7. I'm a bit disappointed about the barrier, but it wouldn't matter because when Recommendation's a very good starting horse, Gelding.
Question without notice here, Professor.
Yes, Gelding.
How does it start out of barrier 7 when there's 6 horses in the field?
Well, that's its nominated starting barrier, Gelding.
Yes, that's its nominated barrier, but of course there's been a scratching in the race.
Yes, Gelding. It's had 18 starts for 8 wins and 6 placings, a 44% win rate, 78% place rate. What I like is Gelding. It's won its last 2 outings over the same distance and at the track. The Group 3, John Monash, and the Bletchingley. And the threat, I think, is Kalos in this race. I don't think Kalos can catch it. If Recommendation gets the lead, I think Kalos will struggle to stay with it.
Yep.
Blake Shin again in the saddle, and one of our former trainers, Gelding, Kieran Maher, who's in very good form at the moment.
Great combination, Maher, Shin, Professor. A horse that's won 2 starts from a spell, gave a bit of a let up, ticked it over in a trial. Just everything's in there. Just ticks all the boxes, Professor.
Yeah. What I didn't mention about Sassy Boom in race 1, Gelding, is the current time. You can get $4.80 and $1.85. It was showing $4.30 and $1.60 last night.
Yep.
So it's drifted out a little bit. So if punters wait a little bit longer, they might get a fairly good price by the time it jumps. As for Recommendation, last night that was showing $2.30 and $1.45. I got up this morning, it's $1.85 and $1.20. So I'm very glad that I took the $2.30 and $1.45 that was on offer last night, Gelding.
Yes, Professor. You're very shrewd when it comes to your placing and timing of bets and all that. But will there be a bit of a deduction because of Arkansas Kid coming out of the field?
Yeah, I think so. Gelding.
Yeah, and I think that may be the reason for the shortening, Professor. Again, I think this is a race between the top 3, but I certainly do like your tip. As I said, no one's going better than Kieran Maher and Blake Shin at the moment, and you've got a horse in winning form.
Yeah.
What else can you ask for?
Exactly. So my 2 bets for today's racing at Caulfield: race 1, horse number 3, Sassy Boom, and race 5, horse number 2, Recommendation. And now we turn to the Professor's Parlay, which was a success last week, Gelding.
Yes.
Fangirl at Randwick ran 3rd.
Yes, bit disappointing, even though it was coming home. So I may be looking when Via Sistina and Fangirl race against one another again. I may be on Via Sistina, Professor. May have it covered.
Yeah, and you were worried about my selection in the Premier League, Gelding, Manchester City to beat Ipswich. Well, 4-1. Wasn't even close.
Panicking for no reason, I was, Professor. Or was it panicking with good reason with the Premier League?
No, Gelding, the points you make about it are quite right, and I do take them into account. It's just that when I see one that I think it's very good odds that will win, that I do go for it.
Oh, you do. And you've surprised me today, Professor.
Well,
I'll be interesting from the listeners' feedback on the
today's parlay. All right, so and we parlayed Manchester City to defeat Ipswich into Melbourne Storm to defeat the Dolphins, and Gelding, they just got in 48-6.
Yes. But anyway, well done, Professor.
So
and that the strike rate up to?
Well, 17 out of 34. So we're back to the hallowed 50%, Gelding. You know I love to sit above 50. I know what you say about it, but I've set a little mark that at the end of the year, I'd like us to be over 50%. And I think if that's the case, we've given good value to the viewers.
If we're over 50% at the end of the year, Professor, we've given fantastic value. As I keep telling you, with these Professor Parlays sitting at 50%, it is just fantastic. We have a lot of racing services out there. And they operate on 30% just on the horse league, Professor, let alone the sporting events, 2 other events. So you're just doing fantastic in this Professor's Parlay, Professor.
All right. my friend, paid 2-1, just over 2-1. Paid $10.50 for last week's parlay, which is a good return when you consider that we go for what we think is going to be a win, so therefore the prices are pretty short.
As you said, we're looking for winners, so we try to take the risk out of it, and we could speculate a bit more and go longer, Professor. But there's a saying, isn't there?
Yes.
You can't eat odds.
No, you can't eat odds, and there's no point having a whole lot of pieces of paper that you're never going to collect on.
Exactly. You can use them for wallpaper, but you can't.
You can't cash them in.
Convert them into the right paper.
That's right, Gelding. All right, so this week, our agreed bet of the day, for all the reasons you mentioned before, Gelding, is race number 9, horse 7, Pride of Jenny. And we'll parlay that into, we're going to the tennis, Gelding, the US Open.
The US Open. This is a unique bet, Professor.
It is third round match, Gelding. So the match that I've selected is between the German Alexander Zverev, who is ranked number 4 in the world, against Argentinian Thomas Martin Etcheverry, who's ranked number 34.
Oh. And?
Well, Etcheverry's never been past the second round before at the US Open. So we're into round 3. So he's in uncharted waters, and I'm thinking that Zverev will win now. The first leg of this part of the parlay is Zverev to beat Etcheverry and win the first set.
Right.
Right?
Yes.
And then we're going to parlay that into Zverev to beat Etcheverry in the match.
Oh, so he's got to get off to a flying start, and we hope he beats him 3. Well, it doesn't matter whether he beats him 3-0 or 3-1, does it? Or 3-2. As long as he wins that first set.
Exactly. So Zverev has won his last 19 third-round matches. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good form.
Yeah.
He's won each of the first sets at the US Open so far. So he gets off to... He doesn't always win the second set, Gelding.
Okay, but we want him to get a fly.
He usually gets off to a flyer. A couple of other things why I like it. Zverev has won $43 million in prize money. He's only 27. That's 5th all time out of everybody who's ever played tennis, Gelding.
Unbelievable, isn't it?
So 43 million, if you don't mind, just in prize money, not in endorsements, not in appearance fees, just for winning tennis matches.
Not bad, is it?
It's a pretty good payday, Gelding.
Oh, we buying the grandkids tennis rackets for their Christmas, are we?
We should be, Gelding. All right, so this week's parlay is race 9, horse 7 at Caulfield, Pride of Jenny, into Alexander Zverev to take the first set over Thomas Martin Etcheverry and to also beat Etcheverry in the game itself. The win parlay is currently showing 3-1. The place parlay showing 3-2.
And Professor, we can tell the listeners that I love it, and I'm very interested in the parlay this week, as I always am, but especially with this. But the game starts very early, Professor.
Yes, Gelding. Punters should get on immediately. The game starts at 11 a.m.
Oh, beautiful.
So when I leave here, I'm going straight to the TAB.
So that'll be probably over by the time Pride of Jenny comes to run.
Yes, so we'll know. It'll all be wrapped up to by this afternoon, Gelding.
Beautiful. I like it, Professor. I like it.
In fact, I'm going to probably go and watch the first set of the match because I've got $1.
I'll be on Foxtel flicking for the races.
I'll be going backwards and forwards between the tennis and the horse racing, Gelding.
Very good, Professor.
All right, Gelding. Thanks for your input today. It's always very much appreciated. Until next Saturday, and that's racing. It's good luck.
And good punting.